I will now take leaders' questions under Standing Order 27, and I ask Deputy Sean O'Farrell.
Yesterday was the International Human Rights Day, and it came, as members know, a week after the tragic death of Jonathan Corrie across the street. It came on a day when tens of thousands of people gathered outside this House to protest against government policy on water, many of them seeing the water policy as a public rights issue. And it came in the aftermath of the frightening expose by RTE of the inhumane treatment of residents in Ars Attracta. I would put it to you, Minister, though, that one of the most dangerous places for women and children in this country is in fact the family home, and that one of the most basic rights is for people to be able to enjoy the residential amenity of their home without fear of violence, be it mental or physical. And we have a huge problem in this country with domestic violence. We're told that in excess of 18,000 reports were received last year by Women's Aid. The Garda Inspectorate reports to us a concern that while 11,000 reports were made to the Gardaí, only 287 arrests were eventually made. And we're conscious as well that since 1996, 204 women died, most of them in the family home, and most of them at the hands of either their husbands or ex-partners. Now, a start in addressing that awful problem would be to look at the crisis of funding in Childline, because Childline provides support to children in situations where extreme violence exists in their homes. 45,000 children called Childline last year. The service was established in 1998, and they now indicate that they cannot continue to provide a service in the evening. Can I ask you, Minister, if you will ensure, number one, that the Minister for Children will move now to augment the funding, the additional funding being raised by Childline, to ensure that these services continue to be available? And can I ask you further, is your government prepared to move now to approve the Istanbul Convention and to provide the necessary resources to ensure that this state can start in a real and meaningful way to combat violence against women up and down the length and breadth of this country?
Thank you, Deputy. Minister.
I thank the Deputy for raising what really is a very important issue, a multifaceted issue, the issue of domestic violence and the related issue of gender-based violence. It's one that there are specific campaigns being carried on by the state to alert people to it as an issue, because by its very nature, unlike violent crimes that occur on the street, a lot of it is invisible even to the Gardaí. And in many instances, people are so intimidated within the domestic setting that it is not possible, or they feel so intimidated and so inhibited from any reaction that it goes on for multiples of years. So I think the issue is a real one. It is multifaceted in as much as we need to have more than one response. And I think the availability of outreach helplines are something of importance, not only on the one that the Deputy has instanced, which is Childline, which is specifically focused on children, run by the ISPCC, a very important charitable organisation in this state, but many others run by the Rape Crisis Centre and various other organisations, including the Samaritans, that are available for people who are in domestic crisis to reach out. And obviously, too, we need to ensure that people can reach out to the Garda Síochána in such instances, because violence against anybody in any setting is a crime. So I will certainly discuss with the Minister for Children the 2 points you raise, the adequate funding to ensure that Childline, as one of the important lines, is available, and also the current position in relation to the Istanbul Convention.
Deputy Sean O'Farrell.
I welcome your response, but I think it's pretty inadequate, Minister, because First and foremost, I think we need a pretty clear commitment at this stage to Childline. That is the point to which children at risk direct their attention. That is where they expect to receive the sort of psychological and emotional support that they so desperately need. And the sort of money involved, 600,000, is not astronomical, and it's not beyond the ability of the Minister for Children to give a commitment to provide that money. The second point in relation to the Istanbul Convention. It is through ratification of the Istanbul Convention and its practical application here, and through the provision of resources to enable its ratification, that we can do something meaningful about combating violence, particularly against women, up and down the length and breadth of this country. We are already in a situation where the number of women's shelters are hopelessly inadequate. I see in my own constituency a situation where a hostel was built, it remained empty for 2 years because the resources to open it were not provided. And when eventually some resources were provided, only half of the residential units were effectively open. Are we going to have to wait, Minister, until a woman or a child is brutalised to death in their homes before action is taken in the way that meaningful action has, in effect, been taken by government in the aftermath of the tragic death of Jonathan Curry?
Thank you, Deputy. Minister?
I think that an awful lot of particular actions have been taken, not only by the state directly, but by a whole panoply of local organisations. I know the Women's Refuge in my own hometown of Wexford being one, which is there with significant HSC support, but also local authority support and public support, which is really important. And that model is replicated across the country. So there's an enormous amount of focus and voluntary effort, as well as state support for the very things that the Deputy is underlining as important, and importance that I absolutely and fundamentally agree should be afforded the issue of domestic violence. There are two things I'd like to say in relation to this. One is one of the biggest difficulties is giving the capacity to people to make that reach-out call, to walk into a shelter. For many people, that is a very difficult psychological thing to do. And that means better communication, better presentation, better understanding at local level. In relation to the... In relation, I wouldn't be flippant about something as important as this, Deputy. In relation to the issue of the helplines, as I say, I will discuss certainly with the Minister for Children the specific helpline you talk about, but it is one of many helplines that are important in this area, because as I said, Childline is a helpline that is aimed at children by definition. But what the Deputy is instancing is primarily violence against women. And there is a range of other helplines, including the ones I've instanced from the Rape Crisis Centre and others, that all must be resourced to ensure that an adequate communication system is available for people who are in peril or in danger or have been abused to reach out. And of course, the most important step for them to take is to call the guards.
Thank you, Minister. I now call Deputy Mary Lou MacDonald.
Minister, yesterday tens of thousands of people protested outside the gates of the Dáil against your government's water charges. It was peaceful and it was a vibrant demonstration of people power. Those tens of thousands... Those tens of thousands of people represent just the front line of a much wider risen people who yesterday joined together and sang in one chorus that they have had enough. Enough cuts, enough poverty, enough of feeling hopeless and helpless, enough of you. They've had enough of your government, and they've told you that these charges are a step too far. Now, you can try, if you wish, to dismiss or downplay or distort the significance of yesterday's Right to Water rally. But that kite just won't fly for you, Minister. So I want to know, did you hear the voices of those people? Did you hear when they told you that partial U-turns and revised packages containing bribes and sour sweeteners and kicking down the road the certainty of metered water charges simply doesn't cut it? The message and the demand of the people is very clear and simple. Abolish water charges, or if you won't, call a general election. And that's it, Minister. That's the choice that you have to make. There is now no other show in town for Fine Gael or Labour. So, Minister, will your government finally do the right thing and scrap these odious water charges?
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
I agree that there was a very powerful manifestation, a peaceful manifestation by and large, on the streets of Dublin yesterday. And that was a manifestation of very many years of difficult economic decisions, not just water charges, I understand that, and the government understands that were required to give us hope for the future, to put our economy back on solid ground that we've done now, to begin to give people hope in planning for the future and creating jobs. In relation to the specific charge, the specific issue in relation to water charges, I think this government has been very listening. The very clear view over many months now was that people wanted certainty, they wanted simplicity, they wanted to know it was affordable in the longer term, and they wanted to know that the money was going to be used to invest in the decrepit public water and public sewage supply we have in this country. Because the old system that Fianna Fáil want to go back to, give it back to the local authorities, has plainly failed us. We need to invest. We need to invest in all the water treatment plants, in all the sewage treatment plants that are required. We need to take away boil water notices and give quality water to people. And I'll just simply say this: since the government's revised package was presented, more than 90,000 people have registered with Irish Water, and I think that puts it into that puts things into some context. As of now, some 935,000 people are registered, because I think most people understand that water and water infrastructure, a quality water supply and a clean water supply for families, for individuals, for companies, and for communities has to be provided. The same as a wastewater treatment plant, rather than spewing solid sewage waste into our streams, into our rivers. That all has to be paid for. If it's not paid for through a usage charge, it will be paid for on a further tax on workers. And I know that the Deputy's party has already outlined $5 billion on additional taxes on work, but I don't think that's the way to go.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Lou McDonald.
Well, I'm going to take that as a long-winded no. You could just have said no. And if you had just said no, at least we would have the clarity, Minister, of knowing that you had in fact heard not just my question clearly, but that you'd heard the voices of the people. People want the certainty and simplicity of the abolition of these charges. People want the certainty and simplicity of knowing that when they turn out in their tens of thousands in the middle of the week on a working day, 2 weeks out from Christmas in the freezing cold, and give you a certain and simple message that you will certainly and simply hear it, and that you will certainly and simply respond to it. So your answer is no. You're hell-bent on these charges, hell-bent on them in the full knowledge of the widespread public dissent, and in the secure knowledge that so many people cannot pay them, that this will be the straw that breaks the camel's back and sinks these families into real financial difficulty and indeed poverty. Well, boola bus for you, Minister, and for your Labour Party colleagues.
With order, please.
The truth is,
Deputy.
you won't, so you won't abolish the charges.
Sorry, no, Deputy McDonald has the floor, please.
So you won't abolish the charges. So can I put it to you then, Minister, that what we need is a general election? You can't waltz in here today, as delusional as all of you are, and pretend that your mandate is still intact. Your mandate is not intact. Your mandate is broken. It was broken by your own broken promises.
Thank you, Deputy.
So, Minister, if you disagree with me, if you, that's I'm finishing now.
Just the Deputy's concluding. I know that I've asked her.
If you disagree with me, Minister, if your backbenchers disagree with me, if you believe that you still have a mandate, if you're certain of that, well then call a general election and prove me wrong.
Thank you. Minister. Order, please. Order.
I know from...
Minister has the floor, please. Order.
I know that...
Minister.
I know that the Sinn Féin party want a general election because they've tabled a motion to that effect earlier. But in terms of policy making, it's not a general election so much as a by-election that determines Sinn Féin policy. Because up to the most recent by-election, they were minded to pay, as the Deputy was herself, water charges, and minded to support them. That's right. But since they were outmanoeuvred in the by-election, they feel now that policy should be determined. So clearly, making fundamental policy in a time of economic crisis by opinion poll will not serve this country well. Decisions on policy are made by the sovereign parliament elected by the people of this country. I would ask the Deputy to have regard for that the assembly of elected politicians, each of us who put our names on a ballot paper, and each of us have the same mandate. You seem to feel, to hear Fianna Fáil talk about false promises. Timmy.
Minister, please.
Timmy, you banjacked the country. We've now restored it. The least you could do in modesty is allow me to answer questions for people who are asking serious questions. Finally, in relation to Deputy MacDonald, as I say, we have absolutely, as a government, been listening to the voice of people. We understand the impositions of the last number of years. But we also look at the consequence for countries, and I'm looking very carefully, in a very worried fashion, at what's happening in Greece right now. If we followed the path that you mapped out for us 4 years ago, we'd be in ruin now. We wouldn't be talking about a 16. We wouldn't be talking about. You see, I know that a democratic assembly is difficult for people to listen to. You like to shout people down to the back of the but in conclusion, we wouldn't, if Sinn Féin and the Socialist Workers' Party, Anti-Austerity Alliance, People Before Profit, whatever you're having today party, had their way, we would be now not paying 16 cents a day for a water charge, or 43 cents a day if you have a family of more than 2 adults. We'd be in ruin without being able to pay for any basic service.
Now for the technical group, please, I call Deputy Maureen O'Sullivan. Could we order, please, now for the Speaker?
Last Saturday, Professor Dermot Ferrier was writing in an article, and he mentioned that 40 years to that day, Alice Leahy produced a report because there was a serious homelessness crisis in Dublin. At that stage, there were 1,000 men and women either sleeping rough or in temporary accommodation, and it led to a task force which highlighted major gaps in approach, and it said that this issue was a matter of urgency. And if I fast forward to 2006, and the same Professor Ferrier was chairing a political debate in Trinity College that was addressed by representatives from all of the political parties and from Deputy Finian McGrath from the Independents, and it was called the Make Room campaign, and the topic in 26 was how to end homelessness by 2010. That didn't happen. Now, Minister Kelly has taken a collaborative, apolitical approach, and he has acknowledged that no one person or no one organisation has all the answers. And the key is persistent action, because otherwise Mr Corey's tragic death last week is just last week's story, and it doesn't go any further, and we will see further tragedies. So the question is, how do we go about preventing homelessness? And part of that, I'm asking that you would look at a piece of legislation, a piece of work that I worked on with Focus Ireland, because they identified a gap in the legislative framework. And this piece of legislation would ensure that local authorities and governments would have the necessary legal framework from which to develop the multi-pronged response that is required. Because I think you would agree that unless we have that coordinated, collaborative approach to homelessness, we will be facing further tragedies. So I'm asking that you would look at this and that you would pursue this with Minister Kelly and with Focus Ireland, because I think, and I'm told, that it would prevent what happens now, which is an individual or a family will go to the local authority, will tell them that in X number of days or next week we are going to be homeless, and the local authority will say, come back when you are homeless. And this piece of legislation, which Focus Ireland are very supportive of, could prevent that happening.
Thank you. Minister?
I thank Deputy O'Sullivan for her question, and indeed for her acknowledgement of the fact that this is a very complex area, one that requires a multifaceted approach, that already has been embraced by Minister Kelly in what Deputy O'Sullivan has characterised as a collaborative, non-party way. It is a priority. It was the centrepiece of my budget statement, the issue of the twin issues of providing social housing and ending homelessness. And during the budget speech I announced, for the next 3 years, €2.2 billion of investment to deal with the issue of the lack of social housing provision. It is a priority, the issue of ending homelessness, as we've set to do by the end of 2016, an absolute priority for Minister Kelly, and one of the reasons that he has moved into that department. He meets with all the social housing groups regularly. There is a meeting every Monday at 9 a.m. With the Dublin City Council to deal with these issues. I won't rehearse again the short-term initiatives that are bringing beds immediately into play, and the provision of night facilities for those who won't go into shelters to make sure that nobody is out in the cold. All those things are being done. But in response to the specific question that the Deputy raised, I certainly will go back to him, because you're absolutely right. Nobody has the absolute answer to this, and all the organisations, particularly the ones you mentioned, like Focus, are important players, and any suggestions, proposals or policy statements they have will be embraced, will be taken into account, and I'll raise that particularly with Minister Kelly.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Maureen O'Sullivan.
Thank you for that, and I will pass on that information, because it has been said before that ending homelessness is a priority, and it hasn't happened. So I just want to look at another aspect now, and I'm glad the Minister for Health is here also. We all know that there are strong links between homelessness, mental health issues, addiction, prison and probation. And there are figures from some organisations of 72% of people who are homeless because of their addiction. So for many, the exit from homelessness is through tackling the addiction issues. And they do that through residential rehabilitation supported programmes. And through that, they get the confidence, they get the life skills, they get the self-esteem in order to turn their lives around. And when that happens, they're less likely to become homeless. What is happening, and cannot be allowed to continue happening, is that those people, young men and women, many out of prison, but in recovery, in supported, drug-free accommodation, they cannot be asked to share accommodation with those people homeless, but who are in active addiction, living chaotic lives. It will jeopardise the recovery of the first group. And I want to mention two projects I visited in the past while, one in Wicklow and one in County Meath. Both of them are working, one of them with young men and women, another with purely young men. Most of them have come out of prison, the majority have been homeless. One organisation gets some funding from a task force, but it only covers a quarter to 1/3 of the total cost of running it, and they have room for more people they can take on. The other organisation started a programme last November with 12 young men, many of them coming out from prison, the majority were homeless. They had to turn down 30 young men. I don't know where they are now. So I'm just asking that those type of organisations could be looked at as examples of excellent practice in dealing with those people who have both addiction and homelessness issues.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister.
I think very sensible proposals that I'm anxious to embrace. As I've said, the scale and nature of the drug problem in Ireland is evolving. It's not a constant issue. And there are things we need to now begin to address again. When I was Minister for Health a very long time ago now, the issue of injecting heroin users with methadone was first highlighted. And I'm not sure that's a permanent solution. I shouldn't be speaking without discussions with the Minister of Health, but there are issues now we need to begin to readdress. In terms of resources, I just said two things again. It again is an area that we've identified in the most recent budget, and an additional 2.1 million euros has been allocated to the HSE for social inclusion programmes, which will deal with a number of addiction programmes, including the provision of detox beds, because we need to get to a situation where people who want to detox are provided with the facilities to do that. The second point I want to make, and it's related to the other issue of homelessness. I think a lot of people were surprised to know when the Homelessness Summit was called and all the organisations were called in, that 37 different organisations were involved in dealing with the issue of homelessness. Again, on the drugs issue, there's a huge range of different bodies. There's not a great deal of coordination. And one of the things that should come out of addressing it in a holistic way is to have much better coordination between bodies that are providing services, so that their common awareness, their common facilities and their understanding of the problems can be brought to bear. And the specific suggestions that Deputy O'Sullivan has made will certainly be brought to the attention of the Minister.
Thank you, Minister.